Great start to the day. I'm glad we've got a lot of people jumping in and getting involved. Welcome again to all of the new participants here. I want to switch gears and get over to our program right now. And first, I do have a couple of things, especially for the new folks. Just a couple of things to share with you. First of all, I would be shirking my responsibility significantly if I did not thank our sponsors. Product Coffee is free to our audience. We do this to support the product management community and to build relationships and networks with our peers around the world, but it's not free to operate. And we have some fantastic sponsors who help us do that. And I want to thank Method, which is a digital software development, customer experience, and digital strategy agency. We also have Pragmatic Institute, one of the world's most recognized names in product management training and certification, and Feature Upvote, which is a tool for product managers to gather voice of the customer feedback directly from their customers. I want to thank all of them for their support of Product Coffee every single week. And you can find out more about them by going to the resources page that I'll show you in just a moment. And their logos will be there if you click over and check out their websites. And if you ever reach out to them for any business purpose, let them know that you heard about them on Product Coffee. So thank you for that. So today we're going to be talking about the Lean Product Playbook by Dan Olsen. This is going to be a real roundtable book discussion. There is not a presenter. I'm not going to sit here and lecture about the book. We're going to talk about our takeaways together. I have prepared a few questions to kind of guide us as we go through it. What I would like to do, in a word or two, what are the most useful concepts from the book? Or if you haven't read it, what would you hope to learn from the book? So if you have read it, what were some of the most useful concepts? And if you haven't read it, what would you hope to learn from it? Drop in a few words here. And you can answer that question multiple times. Got some user feedback, product roadmaps, product market fit, reaching product market fit, measuring success. Start and stay in the problem space for a minute. I like that. Smart. Product market fit is really kind of the big overarching theme here so far. How simple an MVP can be.
Really?
Yes. I was actually talking to someone yesterday who was building a physical product, and they invested significantly in this product only to find out that it didn't work the way they intended. And we were kind of exploring it and realized that they thought, the only way to really test it was to do it. But in reality, we discovered several ways that they could have done very low cost prototypes that would have served the need without having to actually do the physical build that they needed. They could have taken off the shelf products and put them together in a specific way that would have met the use case they were trying to achieve. And in doing so, instead of spending $100,000, they could have spent about $1,000 and learned the same thing very quickly, and then gone on to spend the $100,000 doing the full build. So sometimes it takes some outside thinking. And I would actually challenge folks. This is another great reason to be a part of a community like this. You'll find 2 or 3 people or 4 or 5 people that you trust and respect, and you can bounce ideas confidentially around with and say, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's what I think my MVP is. And ask someone to challenge you on that. Can you think of a simpler way for me to test my hypothesis? It's a great way to leverage communities like this and leverage your peers outside of your business, because they're looking at it with a different set of eyes and a different set of biases than you may already have. So we've got some really good content here. Product value, product market fit, what an MVP really is, frameworks. So let's switch back over. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now and get back to, there we go. So, but you can keep that on your screen. You'll be able to see it. And I wanted to start. So for those who were really kind of talking about the concept of what an MVP really is, was that a question that you would hope to learn, or is that something that you learned about that you thought would be really valuable? The book covered what an MVP really is and the progression from an MVP. Does anybody want to kind of speak to what they kind of took away on that topic? I was having a conversation with someone at my company at Method just yesterday, as a matter of fact, or maybe it was the day before yesterday, about MVP and how that term has gotten a little overused, and the meaning of it has been charred a little bit. It's no longer as valuable of a term. And that's certainly true. A lot of companies, they focus so much on the minimum and they don't focus on the viable. And that was actually one of the thought. Go ahead. That's one of the things that Dan talked about as well. Did I hear somebody speaking up?
It's Reggie.
Hey, Reggie, welcome.
Thanks. I just want to challenge you on that a little bit. It might not have as much value outside your company, but I can tell you when we first had the idea for an app, and I used my Surface to just draw out what I thought the app should look like. And a CTO guy who became a friend of ours, he looked at, I put it on the board at ATDC. I wrote it out on a whiteboard and just wanted his feedback on the content that I had. And he turned around and looked at us and said, "You have an MVP." And I hadn't even looked at it as an MVP. And so we took that and I gave that to our developer, and he created the app. And so it might not have value outside your company, but I think it still has value far as laying out what you want your product to look like. That's just my.
So that's a great perspective. And for those who don't know Reggie's with 32nd Street Media. They're working on a healthcare app, right, Reggie?
Yeah, we have a healthcare app. We're building our platform. We have a back end to EHR, and also I'm working with a company in China. We're going to have our own blood pressure device as well. We're trying to close the loop.
Very cool. Well, welcome back. Glad to have you here.
Thanks.
Does anybody? So Dan actually talked about that a great deal in the book. Did anybody pick up on that? That very concept? He kind of lined out 3 different evolutions of an MVP. And he applied some terminology to cover exactly what you were just talking about, Reggie. He said there's kind of, I actually printed this out because I thought it was a really good quote. He said, the lean approach is about formulating hypotheses and designing tests to validate those hypotheses. And so when I take what the CTO that became a friend of your company's, when I take that perspective and he looked at what you showed him, he was looking at, you've got a piece here that you can evolve and you can move forward and you can use that to carry you forward and you can take it to a developer. Now, what Dan, I think, would say in the book is he'd say, well, what you had there was an MVP test. You had created something that represented what a product could look like and could do. Mm-hmm. But a product is by definition something that you can actually give to a customer. And so taking an MVP test that represents a hypothesis of what will solve the problem, and then creating a prototype or taking it to the next evolution so that you can actually put it in front of customers in an increasingly meaningful way, is part of your path to the MVP. And I think that was and I'm really thank you for that example, because that really kind of brings home the essence of the what an MVP really is discussion. The MVP is the culmination of this initial lean process that gets you to an actual product that is viable in the marketplace, meaning it solves a problem that customers are willing to pay for or to adopt. If you're not actually selling it per se, but it's the minimum set of features that customers will actually pay for in order to solve their problem and get the benefit that you're trying to set them. So that's a great question. Greg asked us protocol for the book discussion. Are we just speaking up, or are we using the raise hand button? Speak up, Greg. Jump in. Everybody, and thanks for asking that.
Okay, yeah, that was just a question for future parts of the discussion. But yeah.
Darn, I was hoping you had something to jump in with.
So I'll jump in really quick here. I spent a lot of time with startups in my past company, and I think one of the biggest challenges is everybody thinks MVP is the starting place. Like that's the first step, and they don't realize that's a viable product. And this prototype gets lost. This rounds of prototypes and testing in the design stage, for whatever reason in the startup community, it's just like the MVP is the first step, and it's just it's not.
I think go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
So Jeff, you view it as the result of the starting steps. Is that?
You should go through. Where you find success is multiple prototypes and testing. Like, people have an idea, they talk to two friends, and like, now I'm ready to create an MVP. And it's just a lot longer, slower process before you're ready to build. People like the 100,000 that Jason mentioned, especially if you're working like with an onshore company or onshore team, people will drop $100,000 in an MVP that they haven't spent, 10 weeks testing with a bunch of different users. It's surprising.
One thing I noticed with what Dan was talking about was there was a lot of analysis, to your point, Jeff and guys, there was a lot of analysis before that. I tried to listen to this book on the audiobook, and it's hard to do because he has so many graphs and stuff that he kept referencing that I'm like, okay, I got to go buy the book now. But the point being was that he spent chapters about mapping out the value of where a product fits before he even got to the MVP discussion. That I think the emphasis was to the point that there's a lot of that goes on. And I think he even mentioned at one point what everybody has kind of said, that MVP is not just a prototype, a working mock-up or an Envision tool or this thing. It is what everybody has said it is. But to get to that point, it is a lot of analysis and stuff first, and then it becomes what is the minimal product that the customers can use. So just to kind of reiterate and jump on that bandwagon, what everybody said. But yeah, if you guys are reading the book, I would read the book and not do the audio book it's hard to follow along because he has a lot of like references in there.
Hey Jeff, do you think speed to market is what's driving that craze to move straight for the MVP?
So it varies a lot by kind of individual and things like that. When you're in the startup space, people just come from so many angles. You have people with a pile of money and an idea, and they just want to be a part of this thing. Other folks, yes, they're very concerned that somebody else is already doing this. I think in the startup space, you just get like everybody thinks their idea is unique and no one else has their idea, and they got to get it out there first. And like that's just, as a lot of us would on this call would know, that's just not true. The first idea is not always the winner by any stretch. I don't know the math on it, but I think there's several things that are driving it. Speed to market.
But it's just become part of the culture.
Yeah,
I agree, but for a startup, especially a startup that doesn't have money, like when we started, we didn't have any money. We still don't have money. We still bootstrapping. And when you don't have money, that's the best way to look at your product in the long view. You can look at it from beginning to end. You can see your holes, and you do need guidance. And we did have a mock-up before we made the final app. But for real startup companies that don't have the resources, It's the best way to take a look at your product, I think.
Well, even if your company has a lot of resources, you should start with this hypothesis and then evolve the hypothesis before you even talk about MVPs and, God forbid, prototypes.
I want to pose a question.
Yes, please.
I've dealt with all of that terminology. I haven't been in that space for too long, as you can probably see on the age of my face. But for the last 4 or 5 years, let's say, I've seen the concept MVP and demo and prototype and all of that being conflated so much that honestly, I myself don't use it anymore. Like I don't talk about MVPs anymore because everybody understands something differently. Because I think the definition that's kind of floating around the room now is, as some said, really like a minimal version of a product that you can sell, that you can give to people. But then again, a very famous example of an MVP could be Dropbox video, right? That's not a product that you can use. That's just a video. Like, is that a test? Is that a prototype? Like, what is it? So I think the MVP concept is just very difficult to, or like there's no standard understanding of it really, what it actually means.
The Dropbox scenario is one we heard all the time, and it's probably in multiple books, and I forget kind of which one where I first saw it, but like someone very important kind of in the product space did call that Dropbox video an MVP. And it was just a video of how it worked. And the idea was, well, he was able to put up a landing page and get enough people to sign up that you knew it would be a viable product. But that is not a product. It's a test to understand people want your product. And that, I forget where that came from, but that was probably the beginning of the end for MVP being a usable term.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, then the next definition, and then I'll also drop out. The next definition to nail down is product. Like, what is a product? I recently read somewhere that a product is something that you can run a company off of, meaning it generates revenue, you have a margin, etc. And I think that is also something that's not necessarily true. I mean, if you look at, I'm from Europe, but if you look at all the VC-backed Silicon Valley startups, none of them have a product. If you say that a product needs to generate some profits, right?
Exactly.
Well, I think also another thing to add to that that would be sort of more Dan Olsen's take on it is that it's not a product unless it's something that a customer can use and that delivers value. So these things like a prototype, a landing page would not necessarily fit the bill, because a landing page is basically like, it's a way to gauge interest, right? It's a way to say, who would, or do we have enough interest to say people would buy this product if it existed? It's not something that they can get in their hands today and use, which if you look at, a physical product, not a software product, you would not consider a landing page to say, would you buy this thing if it existed? Or would you buy this thing today? We would not consider that the product itself if we're talking about something physical.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was actually an interesting, a really important kind of a distinction there as well. You have product market fit tests or marketing tests, and then you have the actual MVP tests that are testing, is this product truly a minimum viable product? Or is this concept a minimum viable product? Or you have a landing page can describe that and help you understand if this is something, a definition worth buying. But a landing page can also just be a test to determine, am I presenting the right message to sell the product? But even so, both of those are kind of pieces on your way to discovering that product market fit and discovering what that minimum viable product truly is, and validating that minimum viable product and getting it to the table. I would agree. A product is, in my mind, is something that has a benefit. It solves a problem for a customer on its own, as whether it be an object or an entity. It solves a problem for a customer. It may not be something that you sell. It may be something that you give. If I look at Facebook, which is a great example, they have multiple products. They have products that solve problems for consumers, for customers, in their social network, but they also have products that they generate revenue off of. I wouldn't say that one is more or less of a product than the other. Now, those are, a lot of us recognize that Facebook's real product is all of us, our eyeballs, and our behaviors and the information about us. At the same time, it's a very layered approach. I would suggest that a product, though, is something that solves a problem for a customer in its entirety. And that product can still have features, which are a separate thing. Anybody else have a different way of summing that up? Manuel, does that kind of summarize what you were saying, or is there a distinction that I'm missing in your definition?
No, I think, that's given that, and I don't want to become, don't want this discussion to become all philosophical, but they're all made up concepts, right? Like what is a product and so on and so forth. And we just need to agree on something that we use the terms in the same way. And I also agree that, I agree with everything you said. Needs to solve a problem. You need to be able to sell it. It, of course, eventually should make you some money and optimally make you more money than you're spending on building it, because then why the hell are you doing it? Altruism, maybe. Yeah. And I wanted to get back to something that Jeff said at some point. I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of startups start with an MVP. And if we do really see the MVP as something that you can already sell people, that already solves in a minimal way, solves a problem, then yeah, you just need to do like 15 prototypes before you even consider building an MVP, I guess. And yeah, for a lot of people, they're like, oh, we're a startup, let's build an MVP. That's kind of the first thing.
Well, part of it's, I think a large part of it's cost. Like the case that Jason was talking about, if you truly can build a product for $1,000 and you can use that to test, then I would probably argue, yeah, maybe that's probably cheaper to build that than it is to just go and do prototypes and things. So do that. But like Dropbox, obviously that was going to be they didn't know that they could do what they were saying they could do as simply as they wanted to. And it was going to be a lot of money to figure that out. So figure out before you build it. So I think this is kind of where the business side, and it goes, what I think two things I heard separately here was, I agree with the product being usable for the customer, and then it's the viable that brings in revenue and sustainability for a company. Like Facebook could be a product that's usable for the customer for a long time and never be viable if they didn't figure out how to sell our eyeballs. And so like that's where viable comes in. I don't think you have to be profitable and sustainable to be considered a product. That'd be my view on it, I guess.
I think also that the idea of a very minimal MVP was the fail fast mentality, where people threw things out there and they said, it's iterative. We're an iterative shop. We can we can fail, we can put it out there, see what works, doesn't work, and go on that and just keep building on something. And I think that is maybe in a startup mentality has its place, so that if you want to get out there, that you can fail fast and correct it quickly. But I think in a more mature organization, you probably need to put a little bit more. And maybe that's the thing, is that we're talking across different organizations here, where we're talking startups or medium-sized organizations, or something that, startup has a certain amount of seed money to get going, where another organization may have enough money they want to know the analysis has been done and what's the ROI on it, right? And so different kinds of discussions based on the population of the size of the organization.
Yeah, because another organization might not have enough money to cross the street. So it just depends,
Absolutely.
Situationally.
Well, the stakeholders too, also, who are funding it, right? So when you've got, angels funding you. You want to produce something quickly, but like with a medium, larger size organization, it's not angels, it's upper management funding you, and then you're on then it becomes a whole nother, career-ending unit if you haven't done the work and you build a product and that turns out to not be a loss on all the resources. Like Manuel just said, we don't build stuff for altruistic reasons. Most of us don't. We build stuff for some kind of positive ROI.
I think the one thing we hadn't spoken about is before we start with the MVP, we do customer discovery to make sure what we're building someone wants. If you don't have a customer for, why even attempt to build?
That's a great segue, Reggie. I was wanting to kind of shift the conversation over to kind of one of the most popular takeaways when we took our little poll here at the very beginning was really the concept of product market fit. Do we have a market? Can we validate that market? And is our solution, is our product going to provide a benefit in a way that is really compelling for that market? So please carry that thought forward for us a little bit, Reggie. What have you done, as you think about this book? And I don't remember, were you in the group that has read the book or is reading the book soon?
Reading the book soon.
Okay, great. So when you think about where you've been and validating your market and identifying product market fit for your product, what's kind of the evolution that you went through to validate that you had a customer in the first place?
Well, we downloaded one of those customer discovery sheets offline. And we went through the worksheet. And one thing you have to do is you have to talk to 100 potential customers just to see if you have a valid product idea. And that's what we did. And in the healthcare space. And that meant getting out of your office, going to events, meeting people you don't know, and talking to them about a product idea. And that's what we did. And so it takes you out of your comfort zone, but you have to know before you even attempt to build something that somebody's going to use it, And so once we figured that out and we built the prototype, then you want to have users use it to see if they're interested in it and if it's something they'll come back and use time after time. And our users did that. And a matter of fact, recently we brought on a data scientist intern, grad student. And we discovered once we started really digging into our data, we didn't realize that our app was being used across the country in Hawaii and the Virgin Islands. We thought it was more of a regional thing that was going on. Once we disseminated and broke that data down, we have more of a reach than we thought. But still, when we launch in January, we are starting in Georgia. We're not targeting the whole country. We're not targeting the Southeast. We are targeting Georgia. My background is broadcast television, and I created a TV show that aired on a national network, but it didn't do well commercially because it didn't have the audience appeal. If we would have started regionally or locally, we would have been able to grow that concept. So that's something I took to this project and just starting in our little space and growing out from there. I might have went too far, Jason.
I don't know. No, I think that's good. I want to real quickly welcome. Let's see, we've got first time visitors. Franklin, Jessica, and Alina have joined since we got started. So thank you so much for joining us. Just so you know, we're kind of into the discussion on product market fit. arriving at product market fit, our takeaways from the Lean Product Playbook on identifying that product market fit. And the rule is just jump in if you have something that an insight that you pulled away from the book that you thought was really valuable. One of the things that I don't know if I should have like done an online, I should have done a graphic of this, but the pyramid that really kind of breaks out the lean product model that Dan has, that really separates the idea of the problem space from the solution space. And when we go, we kind of started our discussion in the solution space with the minimum viable product, which is by definition, that is the solution that you've gotten to. We're stepping back now to product market fit and thinking about the problem space itself. And as Reggie was saying, understanding who is our target customer and more specifically, what are those underserved needs and defining those needs and then creating a value proposition that leads you to a benefit. And it's where those two things that come together that create the product market fit. How did you find, what were your thoughts on the visualization in this pyramid? Charlie, I don't know if you've even seen the pyramid since you've been listening to it, what were your thoughts on that distinction between the problem space and the solution space in the pyramid as it was broken down? Oh, thank you so much for dropping that in there, Jeff. Jeff dropped a link in the chat here. Let's pull it up here and I'll share my screen again. There we go.
And he actually did describe it in the audiobook very well, and I was able to picture it. But I think the biggest thing was I think people jumped to the top three. It was the whole point, right? Like often it's kind of upside down when you get into it. And I think that was kind of the most enlightening part, was that you really got to do that market research up front before you just go in there and start developing features and stuff.
Yeah. I'll jump in and say for my particular the types of products I develop, getting that market fit and sort of determining who your customers are and how you're going to try to crack into this market is extremely important. And it's important to get it right up front. And part of the reason is it's very expensive for us to iterate. We have these large scale enterprise transaction systems. So it's not like something you can just go in and try to put in and try it out and see if it works. It's major implications if it doesn't work. So part of what we try to do is set that, here's the mark we're trying to hit in terms of who's going to be buying this thing. Because our development teams and teams across enterprise are awesome at coming up with feature sets. And it's really hard to get the right feature sets if you don't know who your target customers are, because we overbuild things all the time, and I've seen it everywhere I've been, where, if you're coming in as the low cost leader, you may not want to build all these feature sets because your product's going to get too heavy and, it's sort of a little bit too bloated. So we really want to target that feature set to exactly who we're trying to sell to, because if we miss on that, we may just have a product that's just like our competitor, or it's too expensive for the market, or it doesn't meet it. So, in my world, it was interesting. I've always considered that to be extremely important. I know the pragmatic approach, for those of you guys who know, has kind of a similar emphasis on, defining the market problem, and that's sort of the top thing they try to crack. So it was really, interesting to see that this book sort of took it as, this is about the most important thing you could do as well. So it's interesting to see that consistency between sort of books and approaches and things like that. So I definitely was interested to see that.
Yeah, Matt, you make a great point. I'm in a similar situation where, to make those changes to a product or to even evolve it is a high stakes game. It can be expensive in some cases, and also you may only get one shot at it if resources are scarce. So the question that I'm left with as I'm hearing this discussion is, how do you really know that what you're putting together is being put together in a way that customers will be delighted and they will see value in this product and achieve, recognize that value and achieve it?
It's a wonderful question. I wasn't sure whether I should say it because we're talking about product market fit. Because I feel like I'm introducing a little bit of regression, but that question is so perfect because I think a lot of people talk about product market fit when you don't even have problem solution fit, which pretty much is the answer to your question. If you don't actually know exactly what the really big pain is, the actual problem, if you don't know what kind of solution could solve that problem, then in my opinion, you don't really need to concern yourself with product market fit because you don't actually have anything yet, right?
And that goes directly, I think, back to a question that came in from the YouTube channel. I just pasted in the chat. Caroline asked, isn't validating the assumption the starting point? It leads to a test, whether that be a prototype or more simplistic test. Prototype and then an MVP should be clarification of the assumptions. I think those are highly related to that kind of that direction of tools that you use to validate that there is a problem, what the problem is, and that your hypothesis will solve the problem.
But what about the customer's pain point? What is their pain point? And if their pain point is that they need a number 2 pencil, then you have to create a number 2 pencil. But if you don't know their pain point, you're just making products and hoping they fit into something that they're doing. You have to know what their pain point is. Like what makes them stay up at night, Yeah.
Or
That's
why do they
true.
need a number 2 pencil?
I was going to say that. It's the drill in the hole in the picture analogy, right? Like maybe they just want to draw. Maybe they need an iPad and not a number 2 pencil.
Right.
That's exactly it. So really understanding what people actually need and what the real pain is. I think that's, at least in the problem space, in the product discovery work of the product manager, that's something, jobs to be done. That's something that's really underemphasized. I think like Therese Torres, for example, she's focusing a lot on product discovery, right? I think it's starting to bubble up, in my opinion, where like with Scrum and so on, we were very focused on delivery. So yeah, there's a lot still to be developed there.
Yeah, and we're called product camp, not problem solution camp.
And is that distinction important?
I think it is. You got to fall in love with the problem first and then develop the product.
Exactly.
And I would take that even one more, because back to the number 2 pencil, fall in love with the right problem. So like the 5 whys. And so, we're talking about Dan Olsen, who's obviously from Intuit and things like that. It's if you needed a number 2 pencil because you had to file your tax returns and it's the only thing you used a number 2 pencil for, maybe I should be able to file my tax returns without a number 2 pencil. And it's that kind of thinking. So they asking 5 whys or whatever to get to the right problem. I would just add that to the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and knowing that customer so well, that example is great because, wait, I only ever need this in this one piece of my entire life. The rest of my world revolves around using a paintbrush or a pen or something, but there's one particular time that I need a pencil.
Yes.
Yeah, but when you get that pencil,
if you don't know that going, from your discovery, then you're going to have difficulty expanding beyond, that first solution delivery.
Good point.
Yeah, you'll just solve for a smaller problem and it'll become a feature as opposed to a product type thing if you don't get to a bigger problem. And then, and that's important too. Like, we're talking about building a new product here, not looking for necessarily just new features. And so that's why I think it's especially important to make sure you're solving the right problem and a big enough problem.
Well, when I received the email from Jason and I saw that you guys had a book that you read, the first thing I thought about our product was that our product is lean, because a lot of blood pressure apps, not only do they allow people to track and monitor their blood pressure, but they also allow them to track their diabetes, to track their exercise and all these other things. And what we said was, we're going to focus on blood pressure. So when people come to our app, they input their blood pressure readings and hit save. That's it. We're not trying to do anything else. And when you keep it streamlined like that, it makes it simpler and easier for people to use, but also they want to use it because it answers their problem. It solves their solution versus digging through all these different pages to find a solution I'm looking for.
Yeah, Reggie, you're talking about the healthcare. I just keep thinking about minimum viable product. There's not very many health devices that I want in my world that are minimum viable. But like, do we?
Or is the threshold for minimum viable much higher in healthcare than it is
Gotta say that,
in, say,
Yeah.
you know, toy cars?
So
coming from that space, it definitely is. You have to have something that's well, depending on what exactly it is, it might have to be FDA. You have to be audited by the FDA and all that kind of stuff. So
Exactly.
You would not want to perform open heart surgery with a paper prototype.
yep.
you know, that's funny you say that, but when someone enters a blood pressure reading of 200 over 100, and they receive an alert to call 911, you know, that's life-saving.
Mhm.
And so, you know, keeping it simple helps people stay alive, for lack of a better answer.
Yeah, but and the individual, I think that makes a lot of sense. We were working on something where we were building an app where it was reporting back to the doctors, and the false negatives just became so high that, you know, it's like the false alarms on your home alarm, that then it just became static noise. And so those high readings were ignored. And so it comes back to the accuracy and screening out the noise is, and we're going too deep into healthcare. I apologize for this, but it's like, we can talk about
Jeff, let me say this. We are going too deep, but that's why we'll have our own BP device that will speak to our app, so that when people take their readings, it goes straight to the app. So there's no manual process.
Yeah.
So to kind of bring in the definition of product market fit, right? And it's like one of the first things that Dan addresses in the book, and it's right here on page 3. It's and he's kind of coining Mark Andreessen's words, but he says product market fit means being in a good market with a product that can satisfy that market. So getting to product market fit is, do we have a good market? How do we validate that we have a good market? And do we have a product, or are we in motion to have a product that will satisfy that market or provide a benefit that solves a real problem? Yeah. And and then, you know, the first chunk of the book is really a bunch of really great conversation. And we've been focusing a lot at Product Coffee on market research and validating the market and testing users and customers to identify, you know, do we have the right market? Do we have a validated market? What does our market look like? And we've been talking more about techniques and less about outcomes. And I think this is where the stuff we've been talking about here over the last couple of months really starts to come together. We focused on the tactical activities involved in conducting the research to validate your market, but coming back around now to the why we're validating that market in the first place and bringing it together to the product to understand, to live in that problem space. And I think somebody put in here in the Slido a little bit earlier, they put in start and stay in the problem space for a minute. And that market is really around getting into that problem space understanding the customers and the users that have the problem so that you can really live with that problem, fall in love with that problem, Cortland, and bring it together to create a solution or a benefit. And that was another one of the big themes that Dan spends a lot of time on in this book, is the notion of really understanding and defining the benefit for the customer, not the feature thinking. And that was one of my big takeaways here from the book myself, was we're still, one of the biggest challenges I see in product today is, as people mature in their product management career and they mature in their product thinking, is that feature focus versus benefits and outcomes focus. And it's still a huge challenge. And I do it myself. And that's the thing, is I've been doing this for 15, 20 years. And I know to think about the benefit, but we get trapped. And I know we think about, we intend to think about the problem, but when we get headed down the release path, it is so easy to lose sight of that benefit and start focusing on the feature that we've already decided is going to deliver on that benefit and solve that problem. So now we're just focused on executing, and it becomes very easy to lose track and just start thinking about the deliverable instead of the outcome. So how do we keep that focus on the benefit itself and the outcome that we're driving for? What have you found that works?
I would say that acknowledging that problem is, as always, the first step. And measuring output just gives you a whole bunch of serotonin. So I guess accepting that outcomes are more difficult to measure is just very important. And to really take a step back very, very regularly and to just look at the process in also to apply the agile principles, transparency, adaptation, inspection, all of that, to just also apply that to the process very regularly and just say, hey, in my product discovery process, am I actually focusing on what I believe is the most important thing, or do I need to make some adjustments? I think that's very important. That's more of a mindset, I would say.
I would keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah, I would say that regular communication with your development team. So part of that is really just around reminding them why they're building these solutions. So a specific example that I can think of from my experience is actually wasn't necessarily around the first time or the first iteration of those features, but really the transfer of those features from one major version to another, where basically, the feature we're talking about was preoperative planning for orthopedic surgeries. So the ability to put measurements down on an image, put overlays of the implants and things like that. And the feature was in that particular sort of branch of the product was for the implant sales reps. Because they would use that to know what to bring for surgery, manage inventory, things like that. And our engineers focused on have that a bit available to them, which they did. But what the engineers did not take into account was the way that was used in practice. The value of that was really around collaboration with the physician and agreeing on a surgical plan, and then knowing what to bring for surgery. So because they missed that whole part of it, they had this sort of collaboration part where the physicians couldn't see what was put down on that image. So we had to sort of go back and say, hey, what was the value we were trying to deliver here? And so that, it resolved the problem, but, it should have been caught much, much earlier. But the focus was on deliver the feature, and it's like, okay, they've got it. They can put templates down. They can measure things. Question is, was it useful in the way that they wanted to use it?
So I had a product experience that I've used in my career since it happened, developing lawn and garden equipment for Honda 100 years ago. The question about features was always, does it take another paragraph in the user manual? And that's so obsolete in today's thinking, but it makes you stop and say, wait, if I have to spend time and I have to give up a valuable space in the user manual to explain it, maybe I don't need that feature. So that's always a test I run through my own head. Am I adding this for me or for them?
That's a nice little litmus test. And while we try to do, while we try to stay as far away from user manuals as possible these days, just to try to have self-evident products. The question, it is a great question, is it self-evident enough? Is the value self-evident enough to be worth the investment? That's an interesting perspective to explore as well. We're about 4 minutes away from the top of the hour, so we're going to need to wrap up the discussion. But I do want to, for those of you who weren't here at the very beginning, we have got a pretty exciting announcement coming up. And that is Dan Olsen is going to be joining us on August 11th to talk more about this topic and to kind of weigh in specifically. You know, it's been 6 years since the Lean Product Playbook was published. And I suspect Dan has had, you know, as he continues to consult with clients and work with clients around the world, he's seen some new perspectives and his thinking has evolved as well. And so, I think it'll be a really interesting conversation. We're going to do kind of a fireside chat, town hall type chat with Dan. We're just going to talk about modern product management, some of the things in the book, some of the things that, you know, he's evolved. If he were to rewrite the book today, what would be different, and so on and so forth. But so I thought it'd be fun, as we're kind of leading up to that in a few weeks, to go to capture some questions. So I've relaunched the Slido, and if you'll hit the link that I just dropped in chat, you can jump over there and you will see there is a survey for you to take. And I would love it if you drop in a question or two that you'd like us to talk about with Dan when he joins us, and start thinking about that. And also, before you drop off today, please do go back to the resources page and hit the Product Coffee survey that you'll find there in the center of the page, and go over and tell us how we did on this session. Give us your feedback. Tell us, you know, what would make it better, what you liked about it, and it also gives you a place to make some suggestions for future conversations and future events. I think the next book I want to cover in a book discussion is Teresa Torres's new continuous discovery book. So I'll send out an announcement and a link to that as well. And we'll do that probably in about a month or so, give everybody a little bit of time to read through the book. And I'll try to give a good month head start on the announcement before we actually have the book discussion. It's emerging as a really popular, really thoughtful book on discovery habits and the discovery process. So, and thank you for joining us, Alan. Thank you for everybody who joined us for the first time. It was great to have you here. We generally have anywhere from 30 to 60 people show up on a given day. Our book discussion sessions typically have around 30 to 40 people, so we get into a good deep discussion, and we'll continue to do these about once a month or every couple of months or so as they fit into the rest of the schedule. Next week, we're going to be going back to prioritization frameworks and talking about the RICE framework for prioritization. And that'll wrap us up for the month of July. The first week of August, we're going to have Chuck Blevins speaking. Chuck's a regular here, and he's also an instructor at General Assembly. And we're going to dig into a prioritization topic with Chuck. And then August 11th will be Dan Olsen. And then we've got a few things lined up after that. Also, if you're in Atlanta and haven't already seen it, We are having a Product Spirits happy hour tomorrow. Go over to productcoffee.com/tickets and RSVP for that, so we can tell them how many tables to save us at the Brass Tap in Dunwoody. That'll be in Dunwoody. So, and then we'll be taking that on the road in the next few weeks as well. So depending on where you are in the country and the world, we've got some tentative plans to bring Product Coffee live in person over to Europe next year, as well as several cities around the United States. So we're going to start doing in-person events starting in August as well, which is really exciting. August 4th will be the first Atlanta hybrid event. We'll do Product Coffee in person, but also continue to do the online discussion and the online broadcast. So we'll have a global participation, maybe able to get a few more people in the door, since we can have 1 or 2 seats taken up by a whole room of people. So looking forward to that as well. And that's it for today. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us for the first time too. Take care.